Pay attention to this. A woman and a teenage girl walk toward a house in the late afternoon. The woman's hand rests gently on the girl's shoulder. She glances around, left then right, casual but deliberate. They go inside together. 3 hours later, only the woman walks out. This woman is her stepmother. She's been part of this family for 3 years. She helped with college applications. She drove to soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday. She sat beside her at her mother's funeral and held her hand while she cried. She decorated her room when she moved in. She cooked her favorite meals. She was patient, loving, present. And what nobody knew, what nobody could have known, is that this woman had been waiting for this exact moment for 18 years. She had planned it, rehearsed it, prepared for it with the kind of patience that most people reserve for careers or raising children. Except she wasn't building something. She was waiting to destroy it. This is the story of a woman who loved someone so much that she erased everyone who stood between them. And when you understand how long she waited, how carefully she planned, how perfectly she performed the role of caring stepmother while plotting murder, you'll never look at your parents' new partner the same way again. Madison Hayes was 17 years old in September 2024, senior at Lakewood High School in Portland, Oregon. She had a 3.7 GPA. She played varsity soccer, center midfielder, the position that requires you to see the whole field, to notice patterns, to anticipate what's coming next. That skill made her excellent at soccer. It also made her dangerous to someone with secrets. Madison had dark blonde hair that she wore in a high ponytail during games and loose around her shoulders the rest of the time. She was 5 feet 7 inches tall. She had her mother's smile. Everyone said that. The same warmth. The same genuine kindness that made people feel seen and valued. She was obsessed with true crime podcasts, which is an irony so devastating it's hard to process. She would fall asleep listening to stories about cases that had been solved through small details, through investigators noticing things that didn't quite fit. She was fascinated by how criminals made mistakes, by the patterns they couldn't help but repeat. She wanted to study forensic psychology in college. She'd already been accepted early admission to University of Washington. She talked about working for the FBI someday, about understanding what made people capable of terrible things. She thought she could learn to see evil before it acted. She never saw it living in her own house. Madison had close friends, the kind of friendships teenage girls build that feel unbreakable. Her best friend since 6th grade was Riley Chen. They told each other everything. Almost everything. Because there was one thing Madison kept to herself in those final weeks. One suspicion she was trying to confirm before she said anything out loud. She was careful like that. Methodical. She didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. She wanted to be sure. That caution, that desire to have all the facts before speaking, bought her stepmother the time she needed to act first. Let me take you back to 2006, Portland, Oregon. A coffee shop near Portland State University, where graduate students spent entire afternoons buried in textbooks and laptops. Rachel Morrison was 24 years old, working on her master's degree in education. She tutored undergrads to pay rent. She lived in a studio apartment. She had her whole future mapped out. Finish the degree, get a teaching position at a good high school, maybe meet someone, eventually settle down. She wasn't in a hurry. She was focused. That's when she met David Hayes. He was 26, working as a software developer at a startup that would eventually become very successful. He came to the coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Same table, same order. Americano. Black. No sugar. He'd work for 3 hours straight, barely looking up from his screen. Rachel noticed him because he was always there when she arrived to meet her tutoring students. She noticed the intensity with which he worked. She noticed that he seemed lonely even though the coffee shop was always crowded. She noticed him the way people notice someone before they're consciously aware of noticing. It took David 6 weeks to ask her out. When he finally did, he was nervous, awkward, endearing. Their first date was dinner at a Thai restaurant. They talked for 4 hours. He told her about his work, about the startup, about his dream of eventually moving to Seattle where the tech industry was exploding. She told him about her teaching ambition, about wanting to help students who felt lost or overlooked. They started dating officially in November 2006. By February 2007, David told Rachel he loved her. By June, they were talking about moving in together. Rachel's graduate program would finish in May 2008. David's startup was doing well enough that he could work remotely if needed. They could move to Seattle together, start fresh, build something. Rachel thought she'd found her person. The kind of relationship that felt easy and right. No drama, no games. Just two people who liked each other and wanted the same things. But in August 2007, something happened that changed everything. David's startup needed someone urgently. A project manager position. Someone organized who could handle logistics. David mentioned it to Rachel casually. Did she know anyone? She did. Her roommate's friend was looking for work. Her name was Claire Bennett. Claire was 23 years old, recent college graduate, smart and competent. She'd been working temp jobs since graduation, trying to figure out what she wanted to do. Project management seemed like a good fit. David interviewed her. She got the job. She started in September 2007. For the first month, everything was normal. Claire was good at her job. The startup was growing. Rachel was busy with her thesis. David worked long hours, but that was expected at a startup. Nothing seemed wrong. Until Rachel noticed something small. David mentioned getting drinks after work with the team. He mentioned Claire being there. Nothing inappropriate, just team bonding. But he mentioned it 3 times in 2 weeks. And the way he said Claire's name, there was something different. A slight change in tone. So subtle that Rachel almost dismissed it. But she didn't dismiss it. She paid attention. And over the next 3 months, she watched David pull away. Slowly. Almost imperceptibly. He worked later. He was distracted during their conversations. He stopped making plans for Seattle. In January 2008, Rachel asked him directly, "Is there someone else?" David said no. He said he was stressed about work. He said he was tired. He said everything except the truth. Rachel wanted to believe him. She tried to believe him. But in March 2008, she drove to his office late one evening to surprise him with dinner. She saw his car in the parking lot. She saw another car parked next to it. Claire's car. She waited. An hour later, they walked out together. Too close. Laughing about something. David's hand on Claire's back, just for a moment, but it was there. Rachel confronted him that night. David admitted everything. He'd been sleeping with Claire for 4 months. It started at an office party in November. He was drunk. She was there. It happened once, and then it kept happening. He was sorry. He didn't mean for it to happen. He loved Rachel. But he also had feelings for Claire. Rachel asked him to choose. David said he needed time. Rachel said no. Choose now. David looked at her for a long moment, and then he said Claire's name. Rachel moved out 3 days later. She finished her master's degree in May 2008 while working 3 jobs to cover rent on her own. She watched from a distance as David and Claire's relationship became official. She watched them move in together in July. She watched them get engaged in December. Most people would have grieved and moved on. Rachel Morrison didn't grieve. She cataloged, she remembered. She filed away every detail of Claire's face, Claire's voice, Claire's existence. Because Rachel had decided something during those months after David chose Claire. This wasn't over. This wasn't fair. And someday, somehow, she would correct. Here's what Rachel Morrison's life looked like for the next 18 years. She got her teaching position at a high school in Beaverton, just outside Portland. She was good at it. Patient. Caring. Students loved her. She taught English and ran the creative writing club. She seemed normal. Balanced. The kind of teacher who genuinely cared about students' futures. She dated occasionally. Relationships that lasted 3 months, 6 months, never more than a year. She told friends she was married to her job, that she valued her independence, that she'd settle down when she met the right person. Nobody questioned it. What they didn't know was that Rachel never stopped following David Hayes. She knew where he lived. She knew where he worked. She knew he married Claire in June 2009 in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Willamette Valley. She knew Claire got pregnant in late 2006. She knew they had a daughter in April 2007. Madison Claire Hayes. Rachel kept detailed notes. Not in a journal where someone might find them, but in her head, in careful mental files that she reviewed regularly. She knew David's schedule. She knew Claire worked part-time as a graphic designer from home. She knew Madison went to Lakewood Elementary and then Lakewood Middle School. She knew they took family vacations to Cannon Beach every summer. She never contacted David, never reached out, never gave any indication she was watching. She was patient. Because Rachel understood something most people don't. If you want to truly hurt someone, you don't attack them directly. You become invisible. You wait. You let them build something beautiful. And then you destroy it when they feel safest. For 15 years, Rachel watched David Hayes build a life with Claire. She watched him become successful. She watched his startup get acquired for millions. She watched them buy a nice house in West Lynn. She watched Madison grow from infant to toddler to child to teenager. And she waited for her opportunity. In 2021, that opportunity arrived. Claire Hayes was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in February. The prognosis was 6 to 12 months. She died in November 2021, 8 months after diagnosis. She was 41 years old. Madison was 14. David was 41. And Rachel Morrison was 40 years old, still teaching high school, still single, still waiting. She gave David exactly 1 year to grieve. She was patient even then. She knew rushing would look suspicious. She knew she had to time this perfectly. In November 2022, 1 year after Claire's death, Rachel did something she'd been planning for months. She enrolled in a grief support group at a community center in Lake Oswego. The same grief support group David Hayes had started attending in June. She didn't introduce herself to David directly. She was smarter than that. She participated in group discussions. She shared her own fabricated grief about a relationship that ended, about loss and moving forward. She was vulnerable and honest and relatable. It took David 3 sessions to notice her. 4 sessions before he spoke to her after the meeting. 5 sessions before he asked if she wanted to get coffee sometime. Rachel said yes. And when they sat across from each other at that coffee shop, she pretended not to recognize him. She pretended she'd never seen his face before. She pretended this was a first meeting. David mentioned he worked in tech. Rachel said she was a teacher. They talked about grief and healing. They talked about how hard it was to move forward after losing someone. David mentioned his wife had died. Rachel expressed sympathy. She did not mention that she already knew everything about Claire's death. She did not mention that she'd attended the funeral from a distance. She did not mention that she'd been waiting for this moment for 15 years. They started dating in January 2023. David's family was thrilled. His daughter Madison needed a maternal figure. David needed to move on with his life. This new woman, Rachel Morrison, seemed perfect. Kind, patient, understanding. A teacher who loved working with teenagers. David introduced Rachel to Madison in March 2023. Madison was 15, guarded, still grieving her mother. Rachel was careful. She didn't try too hard. She let Madison set the pace. She was interested without being invasive. She made Madison's favorite foods. She asked about soccer. She offered help with homework, but didn't push. By June 2023, Madison told her father she liked Rachel. She said Rachel wasn't trying to replace her mom. She said it felt okay having her around. David proposed to Rachel in August 2023. They got married in a small ceremony in October. Madison was there, wearing a dress Rachel had helped her pick out. She smiled in the wedding photos. She seemed genuinely happy for her father. Rachel Morrison became Rachel Hayes. She moved into the house where Claire had lived. She slept in the bed where Claire had slept. She cooked in Claire's kitchen. She parked in Claire's spot in the garage. She had erased Claire completely from David's life. Except for one thing. Madison. Madison who had Claire's smile. Madison who looked at Rachel sometimes with an expression that reminded her too much of Claire. Madison who represented everything Rachel had lost 18 years ago when David chose Claire over her. For 3 years, Rachel played the role of perfect stepmother. She was patient, loving, present. She bonded with Madison over college applications. She drove to soccer games and cheered from the stands. She helped with homework and listened to Madison's problems with friends in school. But beneath that performance, Rachel was planning. Because she hadn't waited 18 years just to share David with Claire's daughter. She hadn't carefully positioned herself in this family just to play second to a teenage girl who looked at her father with the same adoration Claire used to have. Madison was an obstacle. And Rachel Morrison had become very good at removing obstacles. September 2024. Madison Hayes was 17 years old. Senior year. Early admission to University of Washington already secured. Life was moving forward. She'd been living with her stepmother for almost 3 years now. They had a good relationship. Not perfect, but good. Rachel was supportive, present. Madison appreciated having a maternal figure after losing her mom so young. But there was something Madison couldn't quite identify, a feeling. Nothing concrete. Just moments where Rachel would look at her with an expression that didn't quite match the situation. Moments where Rachel's smile didn't reach her eyes. Moments where Madison felt like she was being studied rather than seen. Madison mentioned it once to Riley. "Do you ever feel like someone's acting nice but they're actually annoyed?" Riley said, "Yeah, that's just adults being polite." Madison wanted to believe that, but the feeling persisted. On September 7th, 2024, Madison was looking for her laptop charger. She'd left it somewhere, and her laptop was dying. She checked her room, the living room, the kitchen. Then she remembered she'd been doing homework at the dining room table the night before. Rachel had been working on her lesson plans at the other end of the table. Madison went to Rachel's home office to see if the charger had gotten mixed in with Rachel's things. The office door was open. Rachel was at school. Madison didn't think twice about going in. She found her charger on Rachel's desk. Next to it was a notebook. A lesson plan book, Madison assumed. She wasn't trying to snoop. But the notebook was open, and Madison glanced down and saw her father's name written in Rachel's handwriting. Not just once, multiple times. David, written over and over on one page. Circled. Underlined. Madison stared at it for a moment. It seemed odd. But maybe Rachel had been doodling while on the phone. People do that. She was about to leave when she noticed the date at the top of the page. November 2022. 3 months before Rachel and David had supposedly met at the grief support group. Madison's heart started beating faster. She flipped back a page. More notes, more dates. October 2022, September 2022, June 2022. Pages and pages going back months before her father had supposedly met Rachel. Madison knew she shouldn't keep looking. This was private. But something in her gut told her to pay attention. She flipped further back. The notebook went back to 2021, then 2020, then earlier. On a page dated March 2008, she found something that made her blood run cold. A name she recognized. Her mother's name. Claire Bennett, written in Rachel's handwriting with an address. The address where her parents had lived when her mom was still alive. Madison took out her phone and started taking pictures of pages. Her hands were shaking. She didn't understand what she was looking at, but she knew it was wrong. She knew Rachel had lied about when she met David. She knew Rachel had been tracking her family somehow. She found a box in the bottom drawer of Rachel's desk. Inside were printed photographs. Not family photos. Surveillance-style images. Her mom at a grocery store. Her dad leaving work. Madison herself as a child at a playground. Photos that had been taken years ago. Years before Rachel supposedly entered their lives. Madison put everything back exactly as she'd found it. She took her charger and left the office. She went to her room and looked through the photos she'd taken on her phone. She didn't understand it completely. But she understood enough. Rachel had known about their family for years. Rachel had been watching them. Rachel had planned meeting her father. And if Rachel had lied about that, what else had she lied about? Madison opened her laptop and started searching. She Googled her father's name, plus Rachel's name, plus Portland, and dates going back years. She found nothing. She searched her father's old company name. She found an article from 2008 about a startup acquisition. In the photo accompanying the article, she saw her father, younger. Next to him, a woman she didn't recognize. The caption identified her as Claire Bennett, project manager. Her mother, before she married her father. Back when her last name was still Bennett. Madison stared at that photo for a long time. Then she searched for other people in the photo. She found names in the caption. She searched those names on LinkedIn, on Facebook, trying to find anyone who might have known her parents back then. She found someone. A woman named Jennifer Cruz, who worked at the startup in 2007-2008. Madison sent her a message. "Hi, I'm David Hayes' daughter. I'm doing a school project about my family history. Do you remember my dad from when he worked at the startup?" Did you know my mom Claire back then? Jennifer responded the next. Yes. I worked with both of them. Your dad was great. Your mom was wonderful. I was so sorry to hear about her passing. I also remember Rachel Morrison. She used to come to the office sometimes to see David before he and Claire got together. Is she still in Portland? Madison's stomach dropped. Rachel Morrison. Her stepmother's maiden name. She wrote back. What do you remember about Rachel? Jennifer's response came an hour later. She and David dated for a while. Maybe a year? She seemed nice. But when David and Claire started dating, Rachel kind of disappeared. I heard she was pretty upset about it. Why do you ask? Madison didn't respond. She closed her laptop. She sat on her bed for a long time trying to process what she'd learned. Her stepmother had dated her father 18 years ago, before he met her mom. Rachel had been there first. And somehow, years later, after her mom died, Rachel had come back. That wasn't a coincidence. That couldn't be a coincidence. Madison thought about her mother's death. Pancreatic cancer, aggressive, fast. The doctors said it was genetic bad luck. They said Claire did nothing wrong. They said sometimes cancer just happens. But what if it wasn't luck? What if someone had caused it? Madison knew she was thinking like the true crime podcasts she listened to. She knew she sounded paranoid. But the photos, the notebook, the lies about when Rachel met her father, the surveillance images from years ago. Something was very wrong. Madison told Riley everything on September 10th. They met at a coffee shop after school. Madison showed her the photos on her phone, the notebook pages, the surveillance images. Riley's eyes got wide. You need to tell your dad. And say what? That his wife used to date him 18 years ago and never mentioned it? That I went through her private office? He'll think I'm being dramatic. He'll think I'm trying to cause problems because I never fully accepted Rachel. Then go to the police. With what evidence? Old notebooks? Photos that might have innocent explanations? I need more. I need to understand what happened with my mom. I need to know if Rachel had anything to do with it. Riley looked scared. Madison, if you're right, if Rachel did something to your mom, and she knows you're investigating, she doesn't know. I've been careful. I'm just going to look around a little more. See if I can find anything else. Then I'll go to my dad with everything at once. That was September 10th. September 14th was the last day anyone saw Madison Hayes alive. The security camera mounted on the Hayes house captured 11 seconds of footage that would become the most important evidence in the case. 3:47 p.m. A car pulls into the driveway. Rachel Hayes, 42 years old, wearing business casual clothes from her teaching job. Madison Hayes, 17, in her soccer uniform from after-school practice. They get out of the car. Rachel has her hand on Madison's shoulder. They're talking about something. Madison is looking at her phone. They walk toward the front door. As they approach, Rachel glances around, left, then right. Quick, casual, making sure no one is watching. They go inside. The door closes at 3:47:52 p.m. That 11 seconds of footage was the last time anyone saw Madison Hayes alive. But it wasn't the last time the security cameras recorded something. At 6:43 p.m., nearly 3 hours later, the camera captured Rachel Hayes leaving the house alone. She was carrying 2 large bags, the kind you'd use for donation drop-offs. She loaded them into her car. She drove away. At 7:15 p.m., she returned. Without the bag, she went inside. At 7:30 p.m., David Hayes arrived home from work. The camera shows him entering the house. At 7:48 p.m., David came running out. He was on his phone, clearly agitated. He ran to his car, checked inside, ran back to the house. At 7:52 p.m., a police car arrived. What happened inside the house during those 3 hours? Here's what investigators pieced together from forensic evidence and Rachel's eventual confession. Madison came home from soccer practice at 3:47 p.m. with Rachel. David was still at work, wouldn't be home until after 7. It was a normal afternoon. Rachel asked Madison about practice. Madison said it was good. They went inside. Madison went to her room. Or that's what Rachel would later claim. But forensics told a different story. At some point between 3:50 p.m. and 4 p.m., Rachel confronted Madison. Maybe she'd noticed her office had been disturbed. Maybe she'd checked her desk and saw that things had been moved. Maybe she just sensed something in the way Madison had been acting the past few days. Whatever triggered it, Rachel asked Madison directly. "Have you been going through my things?" Madison could have lied. Should have lied. But she was 17 and scared, and she wanted answers. She said yes. She said she'd found the notebooks. She said she knew Rachel had been watching their family for years. She said she knew Rachel had dated her father before. Rachel stayed calm. She asked what else Madison had found. Madison, in her terror and confusion, told her about the photos, about contacting Jennifer, about knowing Rachel had lied. Then Madison made a critical mistake. She said, "Did you do something to my mom?" Rachel's expression changed. Years later, recounting this moment in her confession, Rachel would describe it as the moment she decided. She'd spent 18 years planning, 3 years performing. She wasn't going to let a teenage girl ruin everything. Rachel walked toward Madison. Madison backed away. She was an athlete, strong and fast. But Rachel had the advantage of surprise and commitment. She grabbed Madison before Madison could run. The forensic evidence showed that Madison fought. There were defensive wounds on her hands. There was Rachel's DNA under her fingernails. But Rachel was determined in a way that most people can't comprehend. She had killed before, even if no one knew it yet. She knew what she had to do. Madison Hayes died in her own home, in the hallway between her bedroom and the stairs at approximately 4:15 p.m. on September 14, 2024. Cause of death: asphyxiation. Rachel had strangled her with a decorative scarf that had been hanging on a hook in the hallway. Then Rachel had to make a decision. She had less than 3 hours before David came home. 3 hours to hide a body, clean a crime scene, and create a story that would hold up. She worked methodically. She'd had 3 years to observe the house, to note every detail, to plan for contingencies. She wrapped Madison's body in garbage bags from the garage. She carried her to the car and placed her in the trunk. She cleaned the hallway with bleach. At 6:43 p.m., she drove Madison's body to a location she'd prepared weeks earlier. A storage unit she'd rented under a false name 30 miles outside Portland. She placed the body inside, locked the unit, and drove home. By 7:15 p.m., when she returned, the house was clean. No evidence that anything had happened. She opened Madison's bedroom window from the inside. She left Madison's phone on her bed. She messed up the covers slightly to make it look like Madison had been there recently. Then she waited for David to come home. At 7:30 p.m., David walked through the door, calling Madison's name. Rachel met him in the kitchen. She was calm. She said Madison had gone to her room to change after practice. She said she'd been in the shower. David went upstairs to say hi to Madison. He found her bedroom empty, window open, phone on the bed. He called out for her. No answer. He checked the bathroom. The other bedrooms. Nothing. He came downstairs, confused, but not yet panicked. Her window's open. Her phone's here. Where would she go? Rachel performed concern perfectly. "I don't know. Let me check the house." They searched together. Rachel suggesting places Madison might be. The backyard, the garage. Maybe she walked to a friend's house? David called Riley. Riley hadn't heard from Madison since school. That's when David started to panic. He called 911. And Rachel Morrison Hayes, standing beside her husband while police came to their home, knowing exactly where Madison was, knowing exactly what she'd done, played the role of worried stepmother flawlessly. Portland police treated Madison's disappearance seriously from the start. 17-year-old girl, no history of running away, phone left behind, window open but no indication of forced entry. Parents described her as responsible, grounded, happy. Detective Sarah Chen was assigned to the case within 2 hours. She arrived at the Hayes house at 9:30 p.m. She interviewed David and Rachel separately. David was a mess, barely coherent. Rachel was composed, helpful, trying to remember every detail of the act. She came home from soccer practice around 3:45. We talked about her day. She said practice was good. She went to her room to change. I took a shower. When David got home and went to check on her, she was gone. Did she seem upset about anything? No. Normal teenage mood. Maybe a little quiet this week, but nothing that concerned me. Had anything unusual happened recently? No. Everything was fine. Detective Chen noted Rachel's composure. Most parents in this situation were falling apart. Rachel seemed almost too calm. But grief and fear manifest differently in different people. Some people shut down emotionally. Some people go into practical mode. Chen didn't read too much into it. What Chen did notice was the security camera. She asked to review the footage. David hadn't even thought of it. Rachel mentioned it almost casually. "We have a camera on the front of the house. It might show something." The footage showed Rachel and Madison arriving at 3:47 p.m. It showed Rachel leaving alone at 6:43 p.m. with bags, returning at 7:15 p.m. Nothing else. Chen asked about the bags. Rachel explained she'd been taking donations to Goodwill. Old clothes, books, things she'd been meaning to drop off. "You went to Goodwill during the time your stepdaughter was missing?" "I didn't know she was missing until my husband got home. I thought she was in her room." It was logical, reasonable, and Chen had no reason to doubt it yet. The investigation expanded. Police searched the neighborhood. They interviewed Madison's friends. They pulled her social media, her messages, looking for any indication of where she might have gone. Riley Chen came forward on the second day. She told detectives about Madison's suspicions. She said Madison had found something in Rachel's office. She said Madison thought Rachel had been watching their family. That changed everything. Detectives got a warrant for Rachel's office. They found the notebooks, the surveillance photos, the timeline going back to 2006. They found Madison's mother's name written years before Madison's parents supposedly first met. Rachel was brought in for questioning on September 16th, 2 days after Madison disappeared. She sat across from Detective Chen in an interrogation room, still calm, still composed. "Can you explain these notebooks?" "They're personal journals. They contain your husband's name written hundreds of times. They contain surveillance photos of his family dating back years. They contain his ex-wife's name written before you claim to have met him." Rachel didn't flinch. "I knew David years ago. We dated briefly in college. I knew he'd married someone else. I kept track of him over the years." "Is that a crime?" "You lied about when you met him." "I didn't lie. We reconnected at a grief support group. That's when our current relationship started." "But you knew who he was when you joined that group?" "Yes. I'd known him years ago. I thought maybe we could reconnect." "Is that illegal?" "Legally, it wasn't. Stalking, obsession, even deliberately targeting someone, if there's no explicit threat, it's hard to prosecute." Chen knew this. But the pattern was clear. Rachel had been fixated on David for years. "Where is Madison Hayes?" "I don't know. I wish I did." "You were the last person to see her." "No. David was when he came home and checked on her. The security footage shows you leaving the house alone at 6:43 with bags." "Goodwill donations. I already explained that. We checked with Goodwill. They have no record of your donation that day." Rachel paused for the first time. Just a half second. But Chen saw it. "Maybe I went to a different location. I don't remember exactly which one." "What was in the bags?" "Old clothes, books. I don't remember specifically." Chen pushed harder. "Did you hurt Madison Hayes?" "No, I love Madison. She's my stepdaughter." "Do you know where she is?" "No." Rachel stuck to her story. She'd been home. Madison had been in her room. She'd gone to Goodwill. She had no idea where Madison was. And without a body, without forensic evidence, without a confession, Chen couldn't charge her. But Chen knew. Every instinct told her Rachel Morrison Hayes had killed Madison. The notebooks proved obsession. The surveillance photos proved planning. The timeline proved Rachel had positioned herself in this family deliberately. The question was, where was Madison's body? On September 20th, 6 days after Madison disappeared, a clerk at a U-Store IT facility 30 miles outside Portland was doing routine checks of units. She noticed something that bothered her. Unit 247 had been rented 3 weeks earlier by someone named Sarah Williams, paid in cash for 6 months. The clerk thought it was odd because most people didn't pay that much upfront in cash. She wouldn't have thought anything more about it except that when she walked past Unit 247, she smelled something. Faint, but definitely there. Like something organic was decaying. She called her manager. The manager called police. Police got a warrant. They opened Unit 247 on September 21st. Inside, they found Madison Hayes. She'd been wrapped in garbage bags, exactly like the ones from the Hayes garage. She'd been dead approximately 7 days. Forensic analysis showed she died from asphyxiation. There was Rachel's DNA under Madison's fingernails where Madison had fought back. There were fibers from a scarf found in the Hayes home on Madison's neck. Police arrested Rachel Morrison Hayes on September 21, 2024. She was charged with first-degree murder. But Detective Chen wasn't finished. Because if Rachel had killed Madison, and if Rachel had been obsessed with David for 18 years, and if Rachel had deliberately positioned herself in this family after Claire died, then the obvious question was, did Rachel have something to do with Claire's death too? Claire Hayes had died from pancreatic cancer in November 2021. Or at least that's what the death certificate said. But Chen requested that the body be exhumed. Forensic pathologists did a full examination. What they found changed the case entirely. Claire Hayes didn't die from pancreatic cancer. She'd had cancer, yes. Stage 4, terminal. But the cancer wasn't what killed her. Toxicology found massive amounts of arsenic in her system. Arsenic that had been building up for months before her death. Someone had been poisoning Claire Hayes while she was dying from cancer. Someone had accelerated her death by months, maybe even a year. Police searched Rachel's house again. This time, they were looking for arsenic. They found it in the garage. A container of rat poison, the old kind that contained arsenic trioxide. It had been hidden behind paint cans, carefully wrapped in plastic. Detectives went back through Rachel's teaching records. In 2021, her school had a rodent problem. The district had issued rat poison to all buildings. Rachel had signed out a large container in March 2021, right around when Claire's symptoms got worse. But how had she given it to Claire? Rachel wasn't part of the family yet. She had no access to Claire's food or drinks. Chen found the answer in Claire's medical records. Claire's doctor had prescribed medical marijuana for pain and nausea from the cancer. Edibles, specifically. Gummies that she took daily. David Hayes confirmed that Claire's friend Melissa had been bringing her homemade edibles during her illness. Melissa was a baker who made cannabis edibles for medical patients. Claire swore by them. Detectives tracked down Melissa. She confirmed she'd been making edibles for Claire, but she hadn't delivered them directly. She'd been sending them through mail to Claire's house. Wait, Chen said. You mailed cannabis edibles? Not through USPS, through a delivery service. A woman would pick them up from my house and drop them at Claire's. What woman? I don't know her name. She said she was a friend of Claire's who was helping coordinate care. She offered to pick up the edibles and drop them off so Claire didn't have to leave the house. Can you describe her? Melissa described Rachel Morrison. Rachel had inserted herself into Claire's cancer care under the guise of being helpful. She'd picked up medical edibles from Melissa, and before delivering them to Claire, she'd laced them with arsenic. Claire Hayes had been dying anyway from cancer, but Rachel had accelerated her death, made her suffer more, made sure she died sooner, made sure David would be single and grieving and vulnerable to a woman who showed up at exactly the right time claiming to understand his loss. Rachel Morrison Hayes was charged with a second count of first-degree murder on September 28, 2024. Rachel's trial began in April 2025. The prosecution presented a clear timeline. 2006, 2007. Rachel dated David. David cheated with Claire. David chose Claire. Rachel was devastated. 2008, 2021. Rachel stalked the Hayes family from a distance. She kept detailed notes. She took surveillance photos. She planned. 2021. Claire was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Rachel saw her opportunity. She inserted herself into Claire's care. She poisoned Claire's medical edibles with arsenic. Claire died months sooner than she might have naturally. 2022. Rachel coincidentally joined David's grief support group. She met him for the first time in years. They started dating. 2023. Rachel married David. She moved into the family home. She became Madison's stepmother. 2024. Madison discovered Rachel's notebooks and photos. Madison confronted Rachel. Rachel killed her to protect her secret. The evidence was overwhelming. The notebooks, the photos, the arsenic in Rachel's garage. Melissa's testimony about the mystery woman picking up edibles. The forensic evidence from Madison's murder. Rachel's DNA under Madison's fingernails. The rented storage unit. The lies about goodwill. Rachel's defense tried to argue that the notebooks were the ramblings of someone mentally ill, that the surveillance photos were taken by someone else, that Rachel had no involvement in Claire's poisoning, that Madison's death was an accident during a confrontation. But the timeline was too clear, the planning too obvious, the patience too methodical. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. They found Rachel Morrison Hayes guilty on both counts of first-degree murder, life without possibility of parole. During sentencing, David Hayes gave a victim impact statement that left the courtroom in tears. He described losing his wife to what he thought was cancer. He described finding love again with someone he thought he could trust. He described the moment he learned his second wife had murdered his first wife and his daughter. "I brought her into my home," David said, his voice breaking. "I let her near my daughter. I thought I was giving Madison a maternal figure after losing her mom. I didn't know I was inviting her mother's killer to live with us. I didn't know I was sleeping next to someone who had poisoned my wife. I didn't know that the woman I loved had been planning this for 18 years. He looked at Rachel. "You stole my wife's final year with us. You stole my daughter's entire future. You stole 18 years of your own life waiting to destroy mine. And for what? Because I broke up with you when we were in our 20s? Because I chose someone else?" Rachel stared at him with the same expression she'd worn throughout the trial. Calm, patient, almost serene. And when the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she said something that would be quoted in every true crime documentary about the case. "I waited 18 years. I planned everything perfectly. I did everything right. The only mistake I made was letting Madison live as long as I did. I should have dealt with her the day I moved in." The courtroom erupted. The judge had to call for order. David collapsed in his seat. Rachel was led away in handcuffs, still calm, still composed, as if she'd accomplished something worthwhile. Criminal psychologists who studied Rachel Morrison's case identified her as a textbook example of obsessive love disorder, combined with narcissistic personality traits and psychopathic tendencies. A rare and dangerous combination. Rachel had fixated on David when she was 24 years old. That fixation never wavered for 18 years. Most people move through the stages of grief after a breakup: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Rachel got stuck in denial and anger. She never accepted that the relationship was over. She never moved forward. Instead, she spent 18 years in a holding pattern. Her entire life was structured around waiting. She worked. She maintained appearances. She seemed normal. But internally, she'd never left 2007. She'd never let go of David Hayes. The poisoning of Claire showed premeditation and patience. Arsenic poisoning takes months to build up to fatal levels. Rachel had to carefully dose the edibles. Too much and Claire would die too quickly, raising suspicion. Too little, and it wouldn't work. Rachel had the medical knowledge to calculate exactly how much to use. The murder of Madison was different. That was reactive. Madison had discovered Rachel's secret. Rachel had to act quickly. But even in that moment, she was organized. She had a storage unit prepared. She knew how to clean a crime scene. She maintained her composure even while committing murder. The psychological profile suggested Rachel didn't see her victims as human. Claire was an obstacle. Madison was a problem. They weren't people with their own lives and value. They were things standing between Rachel and what she believed she deserved. Rachel's statement at sentencing, that her only mistake was not killing Madison sooner, revealed the depth of her pathology. She showed no remorse. No recognition that she'd done anything wrong. In her mind, she'd corrected an injustice. David was supposed to be hers. Claire and Madison had been mistakes. Rachel had simply erased those mistakes. David Hayes sold the house in West Lynn. He couldn't live there anymore. Every room held memories of Madison. Every space reminded him of Rachel pretending to be someone she wasn't. He moved to Seattle, the city he'd once planned to move to with Rachel 20 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. He changed careers, quit tech, started working for a nonprofit that helps families of murder victims. He'll never remarry, never date, never trust anyone that completely again. Madison's friends created a scholarship in her name for students interested in forensic psychology. The scholarship description mentions Madison's curiosity, her attention to detail, her desire to understand what makes people capable of terrible things. It mentions that she was trying to solve a mystery when she died. She was right. And being right got her killed. Riley Chen, Madison's best friend, struggles with guilt. She was the one Madison confided in. She was the one who told Madison to get more evidence before going to authorities. She wonders constantly if Madison would still be alive if she'd insisted Madison tell her father immediately. Therapists assure Riley that she did nothing wrong. Rachel was determined. Rachel had been planning for years. The moment Madison showed any hint of discovering the truth, Rachel would have acted. Waiting a few days didn't change the outcome. But Riley will carry that guilt forever. Claire Hayes' family sued Rachel's estate for wrongful death. They won. Not that it matters. Rachel has no assets. The lawsuit was symbolic. A formal acknowledgement that Rachel murdered Claire. That Claire's cancer diagnosis wasn't a death sentence. She had months, maybe a year left. Rachel stole that time. The case raised questions about background checks and dating. Should people be required to disclose past relationships with their current partner? Should there be databases tracking obsessive behavior? The answers aren't clear. Privacy laws protect people's past relationships. Stalking laws require proof of harassment. Rachel never harassed David. She just watched. And waiting isn't a crime. Madison Hayes noticed something was wrong. She found evidence of Rachel's obsession. She started investigating, and she made one critical mistake. She underestimated how far Rachel would go to protect her secret. Madison thought she was dealing with a liar, maybe someone mentally unstable. She didn't realize she was dealing with someone who'd already killed once and would kill again without hesitation. If you suspect something is wrong with someone in your life, especially a step-parent or your parent's partner, trust that instinct. But understand that if you're right, you're not dealing with a normal person making bad choices. You're dealing with someone capable of extraordinary deception and potentially violence. Don't investigate alone. Don't confront them. Don't give them warning that you know. Go to another adult you trust. A teacher, a family friend, a counselor, someone outside the immediate family who can help you contact authorities safely, Madison told Riley. Riley told her to get more evidence. That advice, though well-intentioned, gave Rachel time to act. The better advice would have been, tell an adult who can help right now. Evidence gathering is for police. Safety is for you. Pay attention to inconsistencies in people's stories. Rachel claimed to have met David at a grief support group. She claimed it was a coincidence. But coincidences that are too perfect usually aren't coincidences. They're plans. Pay attention to people who seem too perfect. Rachel was patient, helpful, supportive. Everything a grieving widower would want. Everything a teenage girl who lost her mother would need. She played the role flawlessly because she'd been rehearsing for 18 years. Pay attention to your parents' past relationships. Most people have exes. Most of those relationships end reasonably. But some don't end. Some people never let go. And if someone from your parents' past suddenly reappears after years, ask questions. How did you reconnect? What happened back then? Why now? David never told Madison about Rachel being his girlfriend in college. He'd convinced himself it didn't matter. That was ancient history. He'd moved on. He didn't know Rachel hadn't moved on. He didn't know the woman he was introducing to his daughter as a new stepmother was the same woman he'd broken up with 18 years earlier. If he'd told Madison the truth from the start, maybe Madison would have been more suspicious. Maybe she would have asked more questions. Maybe she would have gone to her father instead of investigating alone. We'll never know. But honesty might have saved her life. 11 seconds of security camera footage. A woman and a girl walking toward a house. The woman's hand on the girl's shoulder. A casual glance around. The door closing. Madison Hayes was 17 years old. She wanted to study forensic psychology. She listened to true crime podcasts. She thought she understood how predators operated. She thought she could recognize danger. She didn't know danger had been living in her house for 3 years. She didn't know her stepmother had been planning for 18 years. She didn't know that the woman who made her favorite meals and drove her to soccer practice had poisoned her mother and would kill her too without hesitation. Claire Hayes died thinking she was losing to cancer. She died without knowing someone was accelerating her death. She died trusting her husband's friend who was helping coordinate her care. She died not knowing that the woman picking up her medical edibles was lacing them with poison. David Hayes lost his wife to what he thought was bad luck and his daughter to what he thought was random violence. He discovered too late that both deaths were connected. Both were planned. Both were executed by someone he'd loved when he was 26 years old, and who'd never stopped loving him, even when that love turned into obsession, and that obsession turned into murder. Rachel Morrison Hayes will die in prison. She'll never be free. She'll never have David. She waited 18 years for something she never achieved. She killed 2 people. She destroyed David's life. She destroyed her own life. And for what? Because she couldn't let go. Because she believed David belonged to her. Because she decided that if she couldn't have the life she'd planned at 24, she would destroy everyone who stood between her and that life. This is the story of patience as a weapon. This is the story of obsession disguised as love. This is the story of a woman who waited 18 years and a girl who trusted her for 3. Pay attention to who lives in your house. Pay attention to who your parents bring into your life. Pay attention when something feels wrong, even if you can't explain it. Because Madison Hayes paid attention. She noticed. She investigated. She knew something was wrong. And knowing the truth killed her.